and welcome to this little webinar to help you with Task 7 in your Jekyll and Hyde booklets. Now, this webinar has been prepared by the lovely Miss Wheatley, who created this PowerPoint to talk you through the extract, but unfortunately she has had some technical issues, so I'm recording this one for her. Now, in the extract, you will see that Stevenson describes in some detail a London scene which has two very contrasting sides. As we read the extract, think about how Stevenson describes the door and what sort of person may live here. It chanced on one of these rambles that their way led them down a by-street in a busy quarter of London. The street was small and what is called quiet, but it drove a thriving trade on the weekdays. The inhabitants were all doing well, it seemed, and all emulously hoping to do better still, and laying out the surplus of their grains and coquetry, so that the shop fronts stood along that thoroughfare with an air of invitation, like rows of smiling saleswomen. Even on Sunday, when it veiled its more florid charms and lay comparatively empty of passage, the street shone out in contrast to its dingy neighbourhood, like a fire in a forest, and with its freshly painted shutters, well-polished brasses, and general cleanliness and gaiety of note, instantly caught and pleased the eye of the passenger. So some vocabulary there that might help you. Emulously just means motivated by spirit of rivalry, surplus and excess of production or supply, and coquetry, flirtatious behaviour. Now, this street does seem like a little flirtatious street. It's in a street that you might want to live on. So you've got those shop fronts being described as a row of smiling saleswomen. It's laying out its goods in a really inviting sort of way. And it seems to be a place that people are doing quite well and they want to do better still. It's a thriving, developing little part of London. And in contrast, the area around it seems very dingy, and it's described that similarly like a fire in a forest against the sort of much more pleasant view of this particular area. It's a place where people care about the homes in their area. The shutters are freshly painted, it's well polished brass, everything's clean, and there's a general happiness or gaiety of atmosphere in the area. So it's an instantly pleasing place to be. Now let's look at some of the techniques that Stevenson uses here. So he uses the adjective small, quiet, but thriving. Thriving with connotations of being full of life and energy and people. He uses some similes, the one I described earlier with the rows of smiling saleswomen. It's an attractive place, and the place is personified as being full of life and charm, like smiling saleswomen. The street shone out in contrast to its dingy neighbourhood like a fire in a forest. Shone has connotations of brightness, exuberance and life. This place is very different to its surrounding neighbourhood, just like a burning fire would be in a dark forest. And freshly painted shutters, as I've said earlier, suggest that it's well maintained and looked after. It's a very sort of socially pleasant sort of place to be, with its well-polished brasses and general cleanliness and gaiety of note. So all in all, the first part of this description suggests that this street is somewhere you might want to visit. It's a place that people care about their environment, they've looked after it well, and it's a thriving part of London. Well, then we go on to a very different attitude in the second part of the extract. Two doors from one corner on the left hand going east, the line was broken by the entry of a court. And just at that point, a certain sinister block of building thrust forward its gable on the street. It was 2 stories high, showed no window, nothing but a door on the lower story, and a blind forehead of discoloured wall on the upper, and bore in every feature the marks of prolonged and sordid negligence. The door, which was equipped with neither bell nor knocker, was blistered and disdained. Tramps slouched into the recess and struck matches on the panels. Children kept shop upon the steps. The schoolboy had tried his knife on the mouldings, and for close on a generation, no one had appeared to drive away these random visitors or to repair their ravages. Now, this is a very contrasting aspect of the place, isn't it? And you can see straight away this is a very different view of pretty much the same area. So some vocabulary that you might be interested in. You've got gable, which is a triangular upper part of a wall at the end of a rigid roof. So it's just part of the roof, really, the gable. Sordid is dirty or squalid. Disdained, the feeling that someone or something is unworthy of one's consideration or respect. And recess, a small space created by a building part of a wall further back from the rest. So you've got a little recess. It's sort of separated and in a little bit of a corner. Now this Sinister building is very, very different. And let's think about going through the keyhole for a moment. Who might live in a place like this? Well, they seem to be someone antisocial, as the door has no bell or knocker. Perhaps they prefer not to be disturbed. Also, the place itself is described as sinister, which may suggest that there is something evil, dark, mysterious about the place and its residents. The building is terribly neglected. If you look at the language there, you've got the discoloured wall, you've got prolonged and sordid negligence, the place is blistered and disdained. Everything about it is not kept well, and it hasn't been kept well or been improved for decades, really, so for a generation. So why has this place been left to go to rack and ruin? What does that tell you about the person that lives there? It's really unusual in Victorian times for someone to allow their home to become so sordid and neglected, particularly if they are rich or a gentleman, because they like to show off their wealth and respectability. This is not a place, perhaps, that respectable people would usually visit, and instead is visited by tramps and vandals. You can see there tramps slouched in the recess, so there's little hidden corners where tramps can hide out or sit. You've also got children playing in the area, undisturbed, but a schoolboy has actually vandalised, tried his knife on the moulding, he's vandalising the building, and no one has repaired this or tried to drive away these people that are destroying the place or making it less sociable. This place seems to lie outside of nice society, and it's being left to go to its sort of rack and ruin. What's some of the methods that Stevenson uses here? He uses the adjective sinister block of building thrust forward its gable. The adjective sinister connotes evil, dark. The verb thrust personifies the building as being forceful and aggressive in some ways. So even in the opening description, it seems a sort of unpleasant and maybe even slightly aggressive place. Discoloured wall, the adjective discoloured suggests something ugly, old and faded. Bore never feature the mark of prolonged and sordid negligence. The adjective prolonged suggests the negligence has been going on for a long time, and sordid suggests negativity and squalor. Blistered and disdained, again, you're building up really a semantic field of abandonment, because everything's falling apart, everything's decaying. This is not a place that's being kept well or being looked after. The verb slouched in the recess and struck matches on the panels. There's sort of laziness and lack of care again. This is all sort of feeds into the place that this isn't a cared for area. The schoolboy had tried his knife on the mouldings. You've got actual antisocial behaviour going on here. No one had appeared to drive away these random visitors or to repair their ravages. Gives the impression that the person who lives behind the door does not care or is not present a lot. So perhaps they're just absent. Perhaps they wish to be left alone. So why did Stevenson create these very contrasting views of the same place? Stevenson uses lots of contrast. The dilapidated, decaying and neglected door stands out in an otherwise bright and well-kept street, and so it would catch your eye. It would be something you may notice. Why use this contrast? He hints that the door is important to the plot. It adds a sense of mystery. The reader wants to know who lives behind this neglected door. We want to go through the keyhole. Stevenson's use of symbolism. What sort of person might live here? Perhaps the door is symbolic of negativity and corruption. It's run down, mistreated, and appears abandoned. This could suggest to the reader that the person or people who live behind it are equally uncaring, unkept, and possibly isolated, just like the mysterious door. And in many ways, perhaps they are also people that are very antisocial and people we might wish to avoid. I hope this little webinar has been helpful to you. Thank you, Year 10.